When the stage lights dimmed and the martini glasses began to overflow in the bustling, smoke-filled casinos of Las Vegas, that was the moment when Dean Martin, the legendary king of cool, would begin speaking the truths Hollywood rarely wanted exposed. He didn't view the industry through rose-colored glasses or starry-eyed ambition. He saw it through the eyes of a rogue who understood every brutal rule of the game. In this world of vanity and illusion, he knew there was no such thing as a free lunch, and that beauty was a currency that never depreciated. Among the glittering elite, sex was often treated as a commodity, passed around like an object at a lavish banquet. Genius and talent were often forced to play dumb, performing as mere amusements for politicians, studio executives, and mafia bosses. Even the most powerful women of Hollywood were not exempt from these manipulations. Many were coerced into participating in cheap stag films, only to spend vast fortunes later in life attempting to erase those records from history. Dean Martin's stories demanded the audience leave behind romanticized visions of cinema. He guided listeners through 5 chapters of a brutal dossier, revealing how the line between a celebrated star and a high-class call girl was sometimes thinner than anyone dared to imagine. His recollections were not gossip. They were first-hand accounts of survival in a world where beauty and charm were weapons, and innocence often came with a steep price. Number 1. Marilyn Monroe. To speak honestly about Hollywood, no one was more qualified than Dean Martin. A core member of the Rat Pack, he had scaled the heights of fame in both Hollywood and Las Vegas. He had witnessed the interplay of money, power, and sexual manipulation disguised as artistry. In his later years, when the limelight had dimmed, Martin would hold a glass in his hand, his gaze distant, and mention Marilyn Monroe with a mix of reverence and sorrow. She was a girl who had been forced to trade pieces of herself in order to survive. To truly understand her story, one must set aside the iconic image of the blonde with a white dress billowing over the subway grate. Go back to the late 1940s, when Marilyn was still Norma Jean Baker, a poor, hungry brunette desperate for a foothold in Hollywood. The industry was ruled by studio moguls who wielded power like royalty, and for girls like Norma Jean, there was only one door to opportunity: the bedroom. Before she became a global sex symbol, she endured long nights of humiliation that history books rarely recount. Dean Martin, through his own observations and conversations with close friends such as Frank Sinatra, and even connections in the underworld, knew the truth. Marilyn was circulated at private parties, traded in exchange for small roles. She was, in effect, a high-class call girl, offering her body to gain entry into a system that otherwise ignored her. One notable example came in 1949, when Marilyn agreed to a nude photo shoot on red velvet for just $50. She didn't do it for artistic expression. She did it to pay the rent and buy food. And yet, this was merely the beginning. At the lavish mansions of studio producers, Marilyn wasn't treated as a guest, but as a piece of dessert, a beautiful object to be admired and claimed. Dean Martin recalled her radiant smile masking eyes that were hollow, fearful, and aware of her position. If she wanted even a minor role in an upcoming production, she had to satisfy the whims of powerful men. The infamous casting couch was not merely a couch. It extended into private hotel rooms, midnight calls, and encounters orchestrated by men who controlled entire careers. Dean Martin once admitted bitterly that Marilyn's innocence on screen was her greatest performance, for in real life, she had been forced to grow up too quickly in a system that demanded she monetize her beauty. There were whispers in Las Vegas, shared only among insiders. Marilyn had been presented at Rat Pack parties to underworld figures, not as a star, but as a gift. Hollywood had exploited her body while presenting glamour to the public. Dean Martin never saw Marilyn Monroe as a bad girl. In his eyes, she was a survivor, trading fragments of herself to reclaim a dream that was otherwise unattainable. The cost of that dream, tragically, was her soul. Number 2. Joan Crawford. Dean Martin exhaled smoke from his cigarette, his half-smile hinting at a world weariness that only those who had truly seen life could possess. If Marilyn was a lamb among wolves, Joan Crawford was a she-wolf who willingly entered the tiger's den. To the public, she was elegance personified, adorned in evening gowns with the poise of a queen. But Martin knew the truth. Before fame, Joan Crawford was Lucille LeSueur, a struggling dancer performing in nightclubs across Chicago and Detroit. These venues, Martin noted, were disguised meat markets where young women's survival depended on more than talent or charm. They depended on willing compliance with unspoken rules. Crawford's darkest secret lay in her youth. MGM had to pay handsomely to bury a stag film called Velvet, which Lucille had participated in out of desperation for money to survive. The studio's notorious fixer, Eddie Mannix, intervened with mafia-like efficiency, purchasing and destroying the negative for an estimated $100,000, a staggering sum at the time. To the public, Joan Crawford became a paragon of morality and sophistication, but Martin recognized the personal cost. She obsessively cleaned and controlled her environment in an attempt to scrub away the shame of her past. Her rigid discipline and pathologically neat habits were survival mechanisms, scars left by a girl who had once sold her body to achieve her place in Hollywood. Joan Crawford was not promiscuous. She was a warrior who mastered the rules of a brutal industry with intelligence, endurance, and sheer willpower. Number 3. Lana Turner. Dean Martin's fingers tapped lightly on the oak table as he contemplated the reach and influence of the underworld. Lana Turner's wholesome sweater girl image was a carefully constructed illusion. Beneath it, she was drawn to danger, willing to trade herself as a high-class companion to the most powerful criminals. Her affair with Johnny Stompanato, a gangster and hitman under Mickey Cohen, was transactional. He gained prestige and the thrill of control. She gained protection and a taste of power, but at a devastating cost to her dignity. The tragedy culminated in 1958, when Turner's 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane, stabbed Stompanato to death in a desperate attempt to protect her mother. That incident revealed the grim truth. Fame and safety were often mutually exclusive in Turner's world, and the price of survival was constant submission to danger. Number 4. Jane Mansfield. The sound of ice clinking against Dean Martin's glass brought back memories of Jane Mansfield, the most strikingly physical beauty he had ever encountered. Often labeled as a Marilyn Monroe copy, Mansfield's story was a tragedy of miscalculation. Gifted with an IQ of 163, fluency in 5 languages, musical talent on the violin, and intelligence rivaling Einstein, she understood that society demanded spectacle over intellect. Jane transformed herself into a commodity, entertaining politicians, tycoons, and the public with revealing attire, calculated poses, and orchestrated wardrobe malfunctions. Behind the glamour lay transactional exploitation, and her early death at 34 in a car accident symbolized the ultimate collapse of a life negotiated between flesh and fame. Number 5. Barbara Stanwyck. Dean Martin's gaze softened as he reflected on the woman who had risen from the mud of Prohibition-era speakeasies to become a Hollywood legend. Born Ruby Stevens and orphaned at 4, she performed in clubs controlled by gangsters and corrupt politicians. Unlike others, she faced the harsh reality not as a victim, but as a strategist, converting pain and humiliation into weapons of survival. Mastering seduction, manipulation, and her own image, she ascended to the peak of Hollywood stardom. Even as Barbara Stanwyck became a symbol of power and elegance, Martin observed in her eyes a fleeting sadness, the loneliness of a woman whose early sacrifices for survival left her incapable of receiving love. Her strength was forged from hardship. She sold her innocence not to be enslaved, but to claim her throne. Dean Martin's dossier concluded with these 5 women: Marilyn Monroe, Joan Crawford, Lana Turner, Jane Mansfield, and Barbara Stanwyck. Number 1 through 5. Each was a beauty icon, a survivor of a ruthless industry where glamour often masked exploitation. Their lives were a stark reminder that Hollywood, while draped in velvet and allure, was a battlefield where women often paid with their dignity to rise. For Dean Martin, this was not scandal, it was survival. The casual observer might see moral compromise or downfall. He saw strategy, endurance, and the painful cost of navigating a world that traded desire for opportunity. If time could be rewound, would any of these stars surrender fame for peace? Would fragile Marilyn or ambitious Lana choose security over the harsh glory of Hollywood? The answers remain uncertain. The story lingers, heavy in the smoke-filled air of Las Vegas, a reminder that behind every glamorous smile lies a ledger of sacrifice, survival, and untold truths.